Okay, this is really a change of paradigm. And for those of you who don't realize it, you really have to relax on this, because the paradigm is what makes this different. It's your thinking. Okay, so the requirement is identified, but the final scope will be identified by the vendor. In other words, they think they know what the requirement is. In the end, the best value vendor will identify what the scope is. And the way that the expert vendor will optimize this process is by creating transparency. Okay, we know now from working on this for 20 years in all different industries, the client has no control over the vendor, but neither does the vendor have any control over the client. We're going back to a natural law that the only reason somebody causes another party risk is they don't have the expertise to understand what's going on. In other words, in the traditional process, where the client, the customer, tells the expert vendor what to do, the value of their expertise goes down and they become more reactive, simply because they're being told what to do. What has happened over time in every industry is this party now thinks that the best way to get the job done is to form a relationship with the client and work with the client, and in working with the client, confusion is caused. And then when things slip, then the vendor turns into a very reactive position saying, well, you knew about it, you're telling me what to do, we're reacting to you. So the paradigm shift is the client is saying, this is what I think I need. The vendor saying, this is what the final scope is going to be and how it's going to be done. And the client says, I buy into that. That's acceptable to me. Therefore, the vendor is actually writing the majority of the terms and conditions on this contract. And this is very important to understand, because what we're saying is, when it turns simplistic and we're looking for an expert who knows a lot about the initial conditions, we're asking them to do what? All the way to the end. Predict exactly what's going to happen in schedule and in cost, and to identify the risk that they don't control and to quantify that risk and put it into their plan. In actuality, what we're doing here is we're telling the expert, you can see it from beginning to end. You know what you don't control. For you to have a plan, you have to have some expectation on who is going to mitigate the risk that you don't control. And you have to clearly identify that risk. See, a problem we have with vendors, and it's in all industries, it's not only in the IT industry. Vendors tend to want to increase their scope, right? Because it gets them more work. The problem with doing this is the risk now goes up or down as they increase their scope. It goes up. When true experts don't want risk, don't like risk, this is a natural law. True experts will minimize their scope so that they can see it from beginning to end and they know exactly what they're doing and they can do it with their eyes closed. They are the only ones now who can identify the risk that they do not control. They are the only ones now who can say, this is what the risk is, and we don't want it happening, or somebody else controls this task, and we expect them to finish it in this time frame with these deliverables. And we can identify that before we even start, which causes the transparency and allows people who are not even experts to see into the future without understanding why that risk actually happens or when it will happen, because the expert has pre-identified when it's going to happen and what must be done to mitigate that risk. Now, a true expert, do they solve the project issue in meeting the requirement from the beginning to the end? Is that how they do it? My question is, there is a requirement in this project. How are you all as vendors going to solve and identify this requirement and then have a very detailed plan that goes from beginning to end. How are you going to solve this?
You visualize the end product or the solution and then work the way back.
So somehow you have to go to the end and identify what that is. And who has to buy into that end product description? The client. When? At the very beginning. Is everybody beginning to see this? If they don't buy into the end product description, then there is no partnership here. There is no project award here. They have to buy into the end project description. Now, when we have somebody, and I know the client has a lot of expertise here, but for the sake of this project and the paradigm shift, we're going to assume that the client is not as expert as the expert vendor. Therefore, we're going to make this obvious and simple. We're going to assume now, and this is not a true description, but for the sake of discussion, we're going to assume that the client is blind or does not understand how we're going to get there and what the actual requirement is. If that is true, how does the expert vendor now communicate with the client to describe the end product? I'm proposing that the simplest language to use is metrics. Say, how many, how long it's going to take, right? What it's going to look like is good, right? But stay away from anything detailed. Just identify how many, what is it in terms that anybody can see, which is metrics.
If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit the thumbs up button and subscribe to our channel for more content. If you have any questions about the best value approach or for Dr. Dean, leave them in the comment section below and we'll get to them in a later video. Thanks, we'll see you next time.